Welcome to everybody. Just a reminder for some of you who don't know, the peer-to-peer network has been cooking along pretty much on a monthly basis with a few months off over the course of a year. I think it's going on 5 years now. And we're a group of people who are involved in affordable multifamily housing in the state of Connecticut specifically, and in the region, you know, up to Massachusetts, maybe a little bit in New York, in addition, and in Kathy's case, Vermont, in addition. And it's developers, owners, designers, engineers, energy consultants who are working in this space. And it has been set up for us to share, you know, sort of war stories with each other about things that work, things that don't work, how to make things work better in that space, and also then to bring in guest speakers to talk about either issues down as, you know, specific as heat pumps and as broad as the policy types of discussions we're going to be having today, because we cross so many different audiences. So for today's presentation, I think I'll turn it over to Kathy to do the introduction. The drill is like it's always been: try to mute yourselves. We're not going to mute you from here, but we'll notice if your cat is meowing or something else is happening in the background. Like my phone, as if on cue. I will mute myself in just a second. But then as you raise your hands and talk, Nandini wants to talk pretty much straight through, and then and take questions and discussion at the end. And raise your hands or just jump in, as probably most people try to raise their hands and then don't. But if they do, I'll recognize you and we'll move on that basis. So turn it over to Kathy.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Nandini, for joining us today. Nandini Natarajan, as you all know, is the lead at CHFA, and most of the folks on this call interact with CHFA in one way or another. But I think a lot of times we don't know a lot about the organizations we work with, and you know, the capacity to collaborate better, to work to solve both environmental and housing issues that we all care a whole lot about. CHFA nationally has more of a reputation almost than it does in Connecticut. And that's because it's part of an important network of housing finance agencies. And it is the gold standard, the AAA bond standard for the nation. And if you go to conferences or have an opportunity to present them and you say you're from Connecticut, they'll go, oh, Connecticut. Connecticut has one of the wealthiest housing finance agencies in the country, approaching, Nandini can tell us better, but probably $1 billion in assets. And as a result is able to do a lot of things that you can't do in other states. So if you're doing a tax credit project in another state and you want a 40-year construction loan that becomes a 40-year loan, you might get laughed at, where here this is normal business. So it's a really exciting resource. I think that Commissioner Mascara Bruno really understands that. And one of the reasons that she brought Nandini in is because Nandini's, you know, huge experience technically in the field in Illinois before this and consulting before that. And so I think that we're fortunate to have some strength in management and technical knowledge going forward, that I want to hear more about what Nandini has to say about recent editorial she did for the Connecticut Mirror. Really points out how much she cares about the housing issue, and I think that's really important. We all know that often people in housing positions are appointed for reasons other than both their technical knowledge and their real commitment to the field, and we're really lucky to have her here. And I'm looking to hear more about what she says about what's already happened, but what most importantly, what can happen in CHFA. Nandini has been very clear that she wants to listen to the community, and so hopefully we'll provide her an opportunity to do that. Welcome.
Thanks, Kathy. That was extremely generous. Flattery will get you everywhere, as they say. Well, good morning, everyone. It is my first time being in front of you all, so I want to say thank you for inviting me. I was trying to figure out how to tailor my remarks because I know many of you are interested in energy efficiency and sustainability, but there are also other topics of interest to you. So I've sort of tailored my remarks to be a little bit more geared toward energy efficiency and some of the new resources and some other things happening at CHFA. But if I'm happy to take questions about anything else that I can weigh in on. So I think what I want to start off with is sort of from our perspective. I know one of the big things people are thinking about now is how to make their programs and resources align with the Inflation Reduction Act. It was passed earlier last year, or in August of last year, and it paved the way really for, incredibly historic levels of investment in sustainability. And so I think everybody here should be happy about what the IRA, is promising to bring in terms of its resources. Our state congressional delegation, worked really hard to make that happen as well. So I think we know that this is a make or break moment really for the earth. And so, we have billions of dollars available through direct spending and then tax credits, which will afford us the opportunity to lower costs of building in energy efficiency measures and cleaner energy use. So from our perspective, I think, with the work we've done together with this group and others, we believe the incentives align well with our qualified allocation plan, and which I'm sure is this sort of the policy document that guides the types of incentives and threshold conditions for awarding the low-income housing tax credit resources in our state. So, and we've done that, through Energy Star, which is sort of our baseline, or, Zero Energy Ready Home, which is a prerequisite for getting energy conservation points in the QAP. So we believe the IRA works well with that and will strengthen the case for using renewables, energy storage, benchmarking, and a lot of other tools and techniques that will help us build more resiliency and sustainability in our communities. In many cases, incorporating solar in a LIHTC development should more than pay for itself, especially when it's sited in brownfields and in low-income census tracts. And I think most notably, the IRA eliminates the basis reduction for pairing energy credits with LIHTC, meaning that the energy credits provided in the bill will not diminish the capacity for generating low-income housing tax credits, which was an issue before the bill was made law. I think we see opportunity in the home rebate program and the high efficiency electric home rebate program, which should help multifamily building owners to make energy efficient retrofits. And I think, just overall, I think we've all developed an appreciation for how housing intersects with health and, sustainable communities and resiliency. And so, we're committed to sustainability. I think we're just starting our journey in some ways in understanding how to make more of it happen without, and incorporate them into our programs. We've renewed our focus on equity and diversity. We've done a lot of work internally and are really doing a lot of that right now internally within the organization, but also the communities we serve. So I believe if we act with intention, the IRA should enable us to make climate justice and racial equity the center point of all of our financing activities and access to our funds. There's a lot of planning and coordinating. As you know, a lot of the resources don't come directly to CHFA. They go through HUD. In some cases, they're going through the Department of Energy, which will mean they'll go through DEEP. And there's a lot of education, quite honestly, that has to happen to members of the community to help them understand and take full advantage of these resources. So I'm hoping that I can work with you all, and I know people at CHFA who are eager to learn how to do that, jointly. In terms of the work at CHFA towards increasing our sustainability, there was an executive order back in 2019 when Governor Lamont first took office, which called on state agencies to reduce their carbon footprint, whether it was greenhouse gas emissions or wasteful water use, or just reducing waste in general. And so although we're a quasi-public agency, we were not included in the order, but we chose to participate. So we've formed a committee, and we were able to make some modest but meaningful efforts. We've replaced lighting in our building that saves a lot of electricity annually. We've cut our trash and recycling in half. We've reduced our sprinkler system usage. We've established this committee like I was talking about, and we're going to keep doing work to try to bring forward initiatives like we're exploring things like rooftop solar and other things, further water saving measures, upgrading to more energy efficient cafeteria appliances, or maybe even an on-site composting initiative. Let me move to another topic, which is what's happening today, and what are we doing in this space that we're talking about. So a couple of years ago, we worked with a number of you to bring a more focused attempt to encourage investment in sustainable measures and energy efficiency. And we believe it is in some ways a trailblazer in the country in terms of QAPs that have been rewritten. And we believe it has progressive performance-based criteria that project teams are rewarded for their sustainability efforts, at the same time bringing flexibility to pick and choose the best methodology given their budget and the unique characteristics of the building. And we wanted to provide choices and meet the teams where they were most comfortable, with the goal of making Connecticut incrementally more sustainable. So looking at the first class of 9% developments that were awarded under the QAP, a couple of them stand out, and I wanted to, call them out today. One of them is Oakwood Apartments in Terryville. It was awarded 12 out of 13 maximum points under the sustainability category. It will achieve LEED Platinum certification while using solar to offset more than 90% of the common area energy demand, and all the while ensuring that energy conservation measures at Oakwoods will achieve a HERS index of less than 42. And then in Newington, Cedar Point 2 was awarded 10 out of 13 points. They're also seeking LEED Platinum certification through passive house design that will include on-site solar. Both developments I mentioned will include benchmarking and commissioning to enhance the longevity and resiliency of the developments and not create sick buildings. And these are just two examples of the kinds of innovative and creative ways that our partners are striving to join us in making Connecticut's communities healthier and more energy efficient. A few words about our current actions in light of what's happening today. So, you know, we're reviewing everything, all of our processes. We've recently hired a new managing director in multifamily, Pat Giuliano. I don't know if many of you may be familiar with him. He was at CHFA previously, left for the private sector, and then we lured him back. And he is and I are intent on, you know, making sure that we button up and tighten up all of our design standards to the extent our design standards are leading to, escalation in costs. We want to look at them and really evaluate them for what value they bring to the development. Our primary goal with DOH, as you know, we're sister agencies, and we've heard a lot about the fact that there's an overlap in the work, that there tends to be redundancy. When I first started over 3 years ago now, I was handed a list of things by SALA. I was like, these are all the issues people are experiencing with DOH and CHFA. And I went back to that list recently, and no, we haven't gotten to everything, but we've gotten to a lot of things. One of the ways we're really trying to streamline things is to really, eliminate some of the process redundancies that existed. And, we're having frequent touch bases with DOH. We're taking reviews that were used to be doubled up at the agencies and, taking the lead in many cases where CHFA is also in the deal. We're closing deals that have both DOH and CHFA financing at CHFA, so it doesn't have an issue with multiple layers. And of course, we have more to do. Not 100% there, but we're strengthening it every day. In terms of what we're seeing in gaps, I mean, I think there's no silver bullet. SALA is very committed to trying to make it work, but she's also of the mind that we've got to find more effective ways to reduce costs than just filling it with gap money. CHFA by itself, as Kathy mentioned, we've really looked at how we can bring resources to the table. So we've provided funding through an opportunity fund that we created that is really meant to be a companion to our first mortgage lending, and it's a soft resource. We've recently applied for and received capital magnet funds from the US Treasury, which we've been using in a lot of deals to blend down the rate or make deals more feasible. We're doing everything we can to provide flexibility in how we underwrite deals. We've, I think Kathy mentioned 40-year amortizations. That's just one of the ways that we're creating that kind of flexibility. We've also used missing middle rents in some cases where there was a gap, and we said, oh, this is a high cost area, maybe we can add some workforce housing units. I put that in quotes because I know that's a term that often gets used, and it can be somewhat controversial, but essentially the missing middle rents to close the gap on a couple of deals. And we're dedicated to reviewing everything that we do and how we do it. We've had some success with working with other agencies that are involved in some of the energy efficiency type of work. Connecticut Green Bank is one of our partners, but one example I'm sure you all know about is the RRES the Residential Renewable Energy Solutions Initiative that we worked with some of you, DOH, CG, Connecticut Green Bank, DEEP, and Pura. And really, I think is a good example of coming together in support of a great cause. Hopefully it will benefit multifamily affordable housing. I know it's in the implementation phase, but essentially it'll afford properties access to the affordable multifamily tariff, which is, I would say 30% higher benefit than the current residential electric rate. It's non-competitive, and most, if not all, of our transactions would come under the under tier 1 of the program, and so I think we're happy with the change in the regulatory authority side, and I think now we just have to work on implementation, which I know is in progress. We're working with Green Bank to do a review of the potential for solar in our current private and state portfolio properties. And I know Seema, Milani, and Jennifer and others are involved in looking at doing a desktop review with some Green Bank staff. And I think the biggest thing for me now is really identifying the potential for leveraging IRA funds, through the tax credit, potentially could be immediately realizable, and something we should look at going forward. And then really just making the development community aware of all of these resources and the Pura decision, and finding ways to support them, whether it's through webinars and other ways that we can continue to educate them and convene meetings and other things to bring the folks together that need to be there to help them understand how to leverage these resources. So that's all I have. I am happy to take questions.
Thanks, Nandini. Everybody, we'll just follow our normal routine, which is if you have a question or comment or anything issue to bring up with Nandini, raise your hand and I'll recognize you. And if that is not working for you, just start talking and we'll be good. One way or the other. We want to put a little order in this situation, but it doesn't have to be, as those of you who've attended these in the past know. So the floor is now open for anything that's emerged from Nandini's remarks that you want to follow up on, find out more information on, comment on, offer support for. So have at it. Kathy.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. That was a great introduction and so hopeful. I have a comment, and then I'm going to pass a question on to suggest one of the other participants ask more about. Ralph, after I finish, I'm going to call on you to talk a little bit about home ownership. We talk a lot about rental, and I think it's, a strength we have with CHFA. So I hope you can talk a little bit about that. I want to, though, before I do that, go back. Nandini really pointed out that the IRA has incredible incentives for solar and renewable tax credits, and particularly for 4% projects. And I was hoping, you might say a little about that to make sure that people understand the strength of that. I don't think the word has gotten out a lot. I think we have an upcoming peer-to-peer program about that. And then maybe Ralph, you can say a little bit about the home ownership market, how we might strengthen that.
Kathy, were you looking to me on the IRA?
Yeah, if you would just say, you mentioned the removing the reduction in the basis and whatever. And if you could just say, like 2 or 3 more words about how that makes projects work better, because I think some people here are familiar with that, but some won't be at all. Yeah.
So basically, my understanding is, and I may not be the best educator in the group here, but maybe Seema can chime in. So let me try. So basically, my understanding is that there are what are known as investment tax credits that could come into a project and infuse liquidity at the outset. And there's the devil's in the details, but essentially it would be a one-time credit based on 30% of the cost of the energy efficiency measures. And I believe it could be solar or energy storage. It may include other things, but that's where I get a little bit lost. But I believe that the way it worked before was a little bit, how should I say this, not as efficient, because if that credit came in, it would have had the effect of reducing the tax credit basis, which is the calculation that enables the investor of the low-income housing tax credit to determine how much equity to put into the project. And so this additional resource, this investment tax credit for solar, in the past would reduce the amount of low-income housing tax credits came in, which obviously is not as beneficial to the project because you want to be able to maximize both resources, right? And so what the IRA did was eliminate that disadvantage so that you could get the investment tax credit and also receive as many low-income housing tax credits as you would have received normally if this basis reduction weren't in place. So that's as much as I know. I'm happy to, again, there's a lot of educating we all have to do, including ourselves. I'm not an expert, but that's
Thank you, but that's helpful. That's what I was looking for.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And Ralph, you said wanted to talk about home ownership.
Maybe more accurately, I want Ralph to talk about home ownership and as he's developing home ownership units, and might talk a little bit more about that really difficult practice and how we could do more in that area.
Okay.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ralph Knighton. I'm doing development primarily in the city of Hartford, developing home ownership for affordable housing. And because the city of Hartford only has like 24% home ownership, it's really difficult to, find space to develop new construction. But primarily, we find that the families that we serve, they can pay the mortgage, but they have a difficult time with the down payment assistance. And so we created a program called House Hartford to help with down payment assistance, as well as CHFA, down payment assistance programs. And so many of the people, like I said, are in these homes. They're creating what we call generational wealth. But the challenge, like Kathy said, is basically finding the resources to mix and match to make these projects work. We're doing 22 family houses in Hartford. We've done 11 already. And again, we've done it with the assistance of CHFA as well as the city of Hartford. But again, the income group, that the target population that we're working with primarily is under 80% of median income. And so that makes it a little more difficult to keep sustainability with the program. But I think with the assistance of CHFA and the city of Hartford with the House Hartford program, which provides a $40,000 subsidy to the homeowner to reduce the rent. I mean, not the rent, but to reduce the mortgage so that it's affordable. And I think that's a very successful program. And I continue to look forward to work with, CHFA to provide the resources for those families in search of home ownership. Again, we have a waiting list for our projects. It's in the north end of Hartford. It's in the northeast neighborhood, one of the toughest neighborhoods in the city of Hartford. But it proves that it can be done. Even with the low income families and things, we might have to do some subsidies and things, but it can work. And that's what we strive for, trying to reach different target populations to sustain the neighborhoods, basically to stabilize the neighborhoods. We found that a number of the neighborhoods in the city of Hartford experience a lot of deferred maintenance. And so from a multifamily perspective, that's the thrust for that housing initiative and things. But basically, with the support of the city and the state and CHFA, we're able to, basically meet our goals. And I think it's very important that those particular programs continue to spread the word that we can do home ownership in these difficult areas.
Thank you, Ralph. Appreciate your words. Question, what's the name of your company?
Terraal,
Okay.
T-O-R-A-A-L. Yeah.
Okay.
LLC. And again, we primarily have been doing work in the north end of Hartford, doing various types of assistance to people looking for housing activities. We're also training a new group of developers, well, a new group to become developers through the Hartford Land Bank program. We start training tomorrow morning to develop the skills necessary to become a developer and go over the technical skills they need to really understand what the development process is. So we're promoting more developers. We're trying to do home ownership and basically trying to stabilize the neighborhoods in the city of Hartford. The city has, not say neglected, but they haven't emphasized the importance of the neighborhoods. They're primarily working in the downtown area and different other parts of the city. But the North End has recently been a focal point. And so they're looking at different resources to shift, community investment fund, and other types of resources to bring home ownership and stability to that part of the city.
Thank you. And I just want to add that I know the Green Bank does a lot of work with energy efficiency in home ownership.
Yes.
And it would be good to know how that, how that's working with existing homeowners, as well as, maybe there's something there for us to explore in terms of CHFA and our resources. So I don't know the answer to that, but I'm happy to look at it. I know that there are homes that, like you said, need deferred maintenance, and some of them could be things that, are energy efficient related improvements.
Yes, we use the, some energy efficient programs in our program, energy savings and things, but we need to expand in that area. We haven't been working in that area lately, but that's something that we would like to look into. And as we go forward, I would like to meet with CHFA and different other funding sources to see what resources are available to minimize the cost, as well as stabilize the units for the families.
I would welcome that.
Thanks, Ralph. Great discussion. Karen has her hand up, and then we've got a question in the chat from Jonathan Sinks. And Karen, why don't you go first, and then Jonathan, we can read yours out, or you can read it out yourself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's an honor to have you just give us an overview. Just wondering a couple of things, one generally, and then one a little bit more technical. So one, is there a sweet spot on project size that has changed over the years, both for new construction or historic renovation? And the second part is just generally are there any changes in sort of the interface on historic renovation with SHPO?
That is the second question is a little more technical. Maybe I can have Sima weigh in, but on the first question, is there a sweet spot? So I think that if you're talking about rental, I'm assuming, or are you talking about? So the low-income housing tax credit resource by itself is better suited for larger developments, right? It's not really meant for smaller buildings. I know that, so CHFA doesn't, traditionally has not had a lot of impact in the small building, less than 20 or less than 50 unit space. But, DOH has recently, so we have a developer engagement process that we rolled out about 3 years ago. So I think it's a third or fourth round. And we've looked to divide our resources up with DOH strategically so that DOH can take on smaller buildings and provide the resources, including TA or pre-development, that might help those smaller developments get off the ground. We do have a small program that we currently run with a few CDFIs in the state that basically brings back online smaller multifamily buildings that are blighted. And it does it through, and it's possible that you may not have heard about this program, and that's one of the things I'm looking at, is there are things we do at CHFA that nobody knows about. So, I think one of the things we're going to work on is how do we get the word out? How do we market these more aggressively so that they are they're available to to be used by developers and others that are interested in using these resources for their building. But essentially, we work with these other lenders, CDFIs, that then make loans to small who's developing these buildings? It's smaller developers that live in these communities, that invest in their neighborhoods. And we've rehabbed a significant number of units in the last several years through this smaller program that I'm referring to. I'm happy to give you information about it.
Yeah, what is the name of that program, please?
It's called the Small Multifamily Loan Pool Program. Okay. And we administer it through a couple of CDFIs in the state.
Okay.
In Hartford, one of them that's a little bit more statewide, and the third one is more in southwestern Connecticut. So,
okay, thank you.
And the second question is a little bit more technical. Mm-hmm. I think maybe Simo, you can weigh in on the question there.
Yeah, sure. Corinne, I think you were speaking about the SHPO,
yes.
SHPO part. So we have been working very closely with Julie, with Morena on the historic credit side of things. And it's been actually going on really well. A lot of times, a lot of challenges. And I know you and me worked on a project that was particularly challenging. I think there's a lot of work to be done, and probably we may have to get in direct conversation with the DC counterparts too, to make the process easier. But at least we are closely coordinating and connecting with them. That's where we are.
Are there specific concerns you want to highlight? I would be interested to know what they are.
Yeah, energy efficiency specifically, windows, doors. Yeah, that very, very specifically, that tends to be one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, insulation. Also.
Insulation. Yeah.
Basically, you're saying that they're the requirements or standards are hard to achieve or expensive, or what about the windows, I guess?
Yes. Yes. The replicating a historic window is difficult when trying to achieve very high levels of energy efficiency. And so it really, the ideal is when there is some play on both sides. Certainly PHI is easier than FIAS, for instance, when trying to get passive house, but so passive house with historic is very, very difficult. And it's just something that we'd really like to bring into being.
So this is Kathy. I'm going to jump in. The Association for Preservation Technology has been working nationally on this, both in terms of, as an organization really committed to historic preservation, but equally committed to the environment. And they're putting together a set of examples and things like that. So
Okay.
one of the things that might be really great is for more collaboration between our practitioners, our officials, and APT that's looking at this nationally and pulling together good examples that have met SHPO criteria, that we can all look at and learn from and hopefully contribute to.
Oh, nice.
I mean, windows are expensive enough without, I guess, becoming, you know, it's hard, it would be really hard to try to do what we're doing. I mean, it's like, you know, it does sound like an issue that needs to be looked at closely. I agree.
Yes, Nandini, because all of these have to be custom, because you are trying to replicate the old historic fabric. That's why it becomes very challenging. And if you're converting a space into historic, into housing, then these need to be well insulated. And if historic SHPO doesn't allow insulation, I mean, they are giving in, but it's harder to, sometimes they may allow, sometimes they may not. So it's hit or miss, or at least more conversations would certainly help.
Great. Thank you. And Jonathan, do you want to ask your question or do you want me to ask it?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I apologize. I may have not very good reception, but if you can hear me, that's great. I actually had a second question that came up in thinking through some of this. So, you know, a couple of years ago, prior to the new QAP, I had made an inquiry with the Green Bank and Rudy to whether or not CPACE was actually a good part of the capital stack to be able to do ground up development in conjunction with the CHFA QAP. And at the time, a couple of years ago, the answer was no, that the two didn't play well in the sandbox. Has that changed? Is there now a way of understanding, you know, where the CPACE portion of the capital stack being a below the line item falls into the underwriting, and is there any guidance that CHFA has gotten for helping with that?
I don't have an answer for you today, Jonathan. I know about CPACE. I've heard about this issue. Unless Seema has something she can add, we're going to have to take that and under advisement and maybe get back to you after this call.
And Nandini,
okay.
I could just add a bit to it. The issue with CPACE and CHFA loans is the priority, is the lien priority. CPACE projects need to be in priority 1, and that's why it's hard to do CPACE with CHFA financing.
No,
So
I think
Oh.
I may be mistaken on that, but I thought CPACE was a non-recourse subordinated instrument that came. You know, my understanding of it was much more flexible than necessarily being in the first position, and maybe I'm wrong in that. So I'm open to being corrected, but I've looked at CPACE for other installations, even post closeout installations of recently built buildings, and mostly it requires a cycle of education with the primary lien holder to understand what the legal ramifications are of it in the capital stack and in the lien priority. But you know, along those lines, because of the way the underwriting works, for, you know, the amount of tax credits to be distributed, and then also the first priority loans to be underwritten, there needs to be an understanding of that there is a below the line draw of revenue away from the property to support the CPACE lending. But ultimately, if the CPACE is available as part of the capital stack, it really can bring down the total lending costs much more substantially, because it's based off of the spread on the 20-year. which is at this point probably the lowest part of the yield curve.
So you're saying, so we're gonna have to get back to you. I don't know the answer. I think SEMA tried, but maybe we don't, we're gonna have to really do some research here, Jonathan. So you're saying that CHFA didn't allow it even when we were not the first, the more, the construction lender, or you're saying trying to figure
No,
out?
I'm not saying that they, I'm not saying that they were. I think I originally was looking at it in the case of a project that we were looking at. And I asked the question of the Connecticut Green Bank, not of CHFA, just to be clear, but of the Connecticut Green Bank, to say, hey, is there an opportunity to leverage the program, the CPACE program, within the total capital stack in trying to build out the energy efficiency parts of the building? Because ostensibly there's a lot of opportunity there, anything from envelope to roofing to HVAC and heating to solar. So there's a substantial availability of kind of access to capital that may really benefit ground up constructions or even rehabs. And it seemed like not the perfect mesh for tax credit deals, but there was no clear answer, I guess, at the end of the day. And that was probably 2 years ago.
Gotcha.
This is, I'm sorry, Kathy again. We just lost Rudy. He left the call from the Green Bank. Unfortunately, he just left for another meeting. I think it's worth a conversation, but I think, Jonathan, the Green Bank has added a lot of new financing tools that are more compatible with CHFA than the PACE loan. And it's probably worth looking at PACE, though. Again, I mean, it's become much more wider used. There was a determination by CHFA, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe longer than that. Time flies fast. That it wasn't accepted with CHFA financing, but it might be, always worth looking at those decisions again. And the PACE loan is basically a tax lien on the property. So just like if you get new sidewalks in some communities, you get a loan. And so that's interpreted differently as its position. Sometimes it's not interpreted as a position at all by some banks. Some see it as a position. So it'd be an interesting thing to reopen.
Well, I think it's a great discussion, a topical point to have, because it's, I've had the discussions with the Green Bank, but I've also had discussions, say, with Nuveen and their green lending department. So, there may be a way of really, juicing the opportunity for, the state of Connecticut's affordable housing process if CHFA were to really take a hard look at it.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a look at it. I can't promise you an answer tomorrow, but I can certainly, have us open it up.
Well, tomorrow's Saturday, so I wouldn't expect.
Oh,
Saturday
good. I'm glad you're giving us.
We'll give you till Monday.
So, and then Jonathan, on your other question, that's also extremely technical. So I don't know. I don't think I have an answer to that one either. But I don't know, Seema, do you have a question? Do you have an answer for Jonathan on his question about depreciation?
All right, I know just a little bit. I'm just, I'm interested in the IRA and what it brings for our industry. So this is how I read it. With the investor not only invest in the tax credit, but they invest in the losses too. So accelerated depreciation means they are recouping benefits there. And because the way IRA is written up, I'm thinking some folks that were, hesitant to take on a LIHTC deal, they now might use all this to their advantage because now the structure is simpler. So we may see a few more people taking on the ITCs and the benefits that it brings. But I don't know, is there a negative effect or a positive effect? That's more like an underwriting question, and we will get back to you on it.
Okay, great.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. Just a note to everybody that Alicia put a link in the chat to a new DOE Buildings Upgrade Prize, also known as Buildings Up, that people might be able to look at. I've seen it, but I haven't dug into it any. Do you have any comment on it, Alicia, or just let everybody know it's there?
Yeah, no, because of my role at the Connecticut Green Building Council, people just share things with me often. And this one was shared with me this week, and I was intrigued because as I understand it, it's another way. It's being distributed, let's see, through the Buildings Up is administered by the National Renewable Energy Lab, and as part of the American Made program, which fast tracks innovation through prizes, training, teaming, and mentoring. And it actually reminded me, I know a while back, Kathy was, we love to talk about these sort of accelerator programs. And I know there was one that we talked about a long time ago that was really juicy, but all of that pales in comparison to the pool of funding that is available now, right, through the IRA and others. So anyway, I was just curious if anybody else has heard of this. It's specifically targeted, I think, to make accelerate widespread equitable energy efficiency and building electrification upgrades. So I believe it's targeted towards existing building stock. And there's two pathways. One is through equity, which teams can realize up to $400,000 on a project, and the other pathway is for $200,000 in cash. And prizes means you don't, as we all know, you don't have to pay it back. It's not a grant. It's not a loan. Prizes are a good thing. So I just wondered, I was actually kind of curious, has anybody else on this call heard of this? Or I did share a link, although I thought for sure it would, it just looks like a gobbledygook link, but it should take you to the site that was shared with me.
Alicia, I had heard of it and looked at it, and they've used prize in a couple of announcements they've had recently, and they're kind of strange. Like, how do you apply for it? When do you apply for it? When is I mean, what we've been talking about here with these capital stacks, how does it fit into that? Can you count on it if you don't get it? Those kinds.
Yeah, well, that's, what that is. Yeah, that's an excellent question about, can you count on it? I did again, and someone shared it with me on my phone. So it opens right up, and it actually does give a little bit more information. It says it's a cash prize. I know it does sound gimmicky. And phase 1 opens for submissions on February 18th of 2023. And and will be awarded on a rolling basis until funds are expended. And they mentioned for, even smaller project teams should apply. So anyway, I think it's definitely worth looking into. It's like one of those rocks you potentially want to look underneath if you're looking for funding sources.
Yeah, funding sources that don't move and aren't alive, I guess, when they're under a rock. But,
Right.
But this actually, it's an interesting thing to think about in terms of, are you planning to do a project and you want to get this prize for a project you're planning to do? Usually for me, a prize is for a project you've done. And either you've done it well and you deserve a prize, or you've done something and you want to add something to it. So, but they're talking about electrification. Maybe that's an area that might be of interest in terms of looking at, hey, how do I get extra money to prepare to future-proof a building for electrification? What's needed, if anything? So that's an interesting one. But thanks for flagging that, Alicia. So we're getting close to the time bell here. Any other questions from the group? I have one, but I'll wait and see if anybody raises their hand or just jumps in. We've covered a lot of ground.
Jump off for another call. Do you think we can just ask the last question? I have another call. I have to jump.
Okay, I just asked one then, Nandini. In terms of what you now sort of understand about us, how can we help you move this forward? I mean, you've talked about education. We've done that. We can act as a peer review sounding board for anything you're thinking about. I don't know if Kathy or anybody else has any ideas, but sort of that's what we're set up to do, is to share with each other and also then try to.
I think
work with people
there are good examples of when we've used this group, right? I mean, I believe you were involved in the RRES stuff. We've, worked with you on the QAP. I don't know if all of you were involved, but certainly some of you were. So I know that there's, probably ways we can work together in the future, maybe on the education piece, but I can give it some thought and I'll talk with some folks and happy to bounce off ideas, in the near future.
Perfect. Okay. Well, everybody join me in thanking Nandini for her presentation for discussion today. Hopefully it's just the beginning of a long and fruitful friendship.
Sounds great.
between you
Thank you
and
for
the
welcoming
PTP.
me, and we appreciate it. We'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Okay. And just for the P2P folks, we're going to continue doing these monthly meetings via Zoom, except we may have one tour coming up, a visit. And we'll be getting back to you with who the speakers are going to be. I think the core group who's been sort of identifying, thinking about speakers will get together probably next week and outline something through the end of the fiscal, through the end of June. So stay with us, stay tuned for more. Unless anybody has any other comments, I think we can close out for now, and enjoy the upcoming weekend. When Nandini will be hard at work answering our questions, but we can go out and play. So thank you all for coming. Good to see you all again. And again, have a good weekend.